If you're on the fence about the level of quality FDM can achieve, this video will push you flying off that fence and land you safely in the lush, puppy-filled garden that is the world of resin-like FDM prints that look astonishing. You see, with my last video that did so incredibly well, thank you guys, I got so many comments from people saying that would love to see me do a full settings video. But due to the fact that that Wolverine was printed using probably 80%, 90% of Bambu's default settings with just a few tweaks, I thought I can't really do a whole video on that and claim it as being content. Instead, I thought I'll go away and I'll create settings that will push the Bambu Labs A1 and H2D with a 0.2 nozzle to the absolute limit of quality. And I chose to use a Master Chief helmet at 1/6 scale, but the settings were so good that I just had to try Master Chief minis as well. And I'll hope you'll agree that the results are mind-blowing. Right, let's crack on. First thing to do if you want ultimate quality is make sure you give your printers a once over. My A1 was pretty grotty. I decided for this test to use this Master Chief helmet because I'd already got a resin one printed and primed up anyway. So I didn't have to get the resin printers out from under the desk and get them all dirty again because I'd really just clean them up and put them away. Plus, this Master Chief helmet has got sharp edges, layer lines, the hexagonal pattern, and there's sort of like oxygen pipes, tiny details, flat surfaces, and then that awesomely smooth curve for the visor. So it's got a bit of everything really. And in Blender, decided to cut it in a way that I think would print pretty well on an FDM printer. The Master Chief STL itself is from Wicked, and I'll post a link down below in the description. So I printed this first test on the H2D with the 0.2 nozzle at 0.04 layer height using the 0.06 fine default settings with just a slight slowdown of speeds and obviously the change of the layer height. You have to go into the H2D's printer settings and just edit the minimum layer height from 0.08 to 0.04. Now I'm going to have to break it to you, it took about a day to do, but these settings are all about quality and not about speed. It's for those parts that you would really ideally use a resin printer for, but now you can do it on an FDM printer if you've just got a little bit of time to do it. And right on cue to prove that point, just look at the detail on the hexagons in that pipe work and how smooth his visor looks. Yep, there's a few issues, so the settings aren't perfect just yet, but just look how invisible the layer lines are, just how sharp the panel lines are. Yes, it's not as crisp or sharp as it would be in resin, of course, but it's damn close. And once you've got primer and paint on it, you are not going to tell the difference. As you can see here side by side, the one on the right is the resin one, the one on the left is a marginally cleaned FDM one, and there's not that much difference whatsoever. So once you get a layer of actual paint on there, it's going to be indistinguishable. Right, I might as well keep that mistake in because it goes in line with showing this mistake, which is the awful quality print that I got off of the A1, just using the same method to the H2D of just taking a 0.06 preset and just changing the layer height. There's a few other things in this setting that are hangovers from using the defaults, which I didn't know were coming back to haunt me. So after lots of tests and it continuing to happen to lesser degree but not completely disappearing, I actually changed to 0.06 layer height because the 0.04 is just not very reliable. So on the left hand side is the 0.04 layer height on the H2D, and the one on the right is the 0.06. Okay, the settings aren't dialed in that well on the 0.06 on the right hand side, but it printed a lot quicker, and it's really marginal gains at this point in terms of detail. However, I then went through quite a long and tedious back and forth with researching online, even got AI to help me with, but to be honest, I had to teach it as much as it was teaching me. So AI has been sort of used, but honestly, it tells you one thing and it doesn't work. And then you say, have you checked everything? And it says yes. And it hasn't, because the one thing that was ruining the prints was a bog standard setting. The vertical shell speeds were 80% of a really, really high 150 millimeters per second infill setting, which, well, that shouldn't have been that high. And 80% of that to do an external wall is going to cause issues, especially when like the other outer walls are like 20 millimeters per second. Anyway, I went through all that and got these gorgeous 0.06 prints on both the A1 and the H2D. I had a little bit of a different change in the orientation, so that's why on the nose and the top of his visor you can just see the layer lines. But on the whole, and the fact that it's like 30% quicker to print it, it was a no-brainer really. But that being said, I do go back and actually sort out the 0.04 just in case you want to try that too. I love how the resolution of the printers is actually showing up some of the battle damage that's in the STL. And I have to say as well, these none of these were sanded or finished in any way, so you got to clean them up a little bit. But anyway, it was time for just a little bit of primer and a bit of paint. But before I go on to that, the best thing you can do to help my channel grow is to watch this video to the end. And if you comment, like, and do a hype, I think hypes are mobile only. It's these exact interactions, especially in the first few hours and the first day of it going live, that signals to YouTube that people like my content. I can't thank you enough for all your support. Anyway, on the H2D, it didn't really change anything other than make sure you're doing this on both extruders. It's just changed that layer height minimum from 0.08 to 0.04. The Z hop and all that kind of stuff are set as the same as my filament settings, but I think the filament does overwrite it. So I'll just show you all the settings on screen so you can pause and you can just have a look at them. I won't take you through all the reasons for all the changes because that'll just take forever and just make this video 30 or 40 minutes long. I'll just say that the things to really make note of are the speeds, the volumetric flows, and the temperatures. They're the key things. Obviously, dependent on your own calibration, and dry your filaments. If you want to know a little bit more detail about all the settings in here, I have created a 29-page guide which goes through every single setting for the A1 and H2D next to each other, explains why there was a change, if there was a change, what the thought process behind it was, and also the way to adapt it to Orca, Prusa or Cura slices. And this is available for my higher tier Patreon members and on Gumroad, links in the description. And you also get the process JSON files, which are the types of files that you get when you export the presets, the process presets. I'm not done the filament one because there's so many different filaments out there. I use Bambu Matte PLA. But you do get the process JSON files for the H2D 0.06, the A1 0.06, and the 0.04 for both too, for you to import them if you're using Bambu Studio or if you're using Orca Slicer. And links to Gumroad or to Patreon are in the description. So I'm just going to caveat that these are just my settings that are found to be exceptionally good, both for the helmet and for the miniatures. But using different hardware, different printers, different setups, different humidity, temperatures, all that kind of stuff will play a big part. And if you are using Bambu Studio or Orca Slicer, the imports will only show up if you've added an A1 or a H2D 0.2 nozzle printer. Let me know in the comments how you get along. It has taken pretty much all of February for me to do all the tests and print off in my spare time, so there was a lot of effort got into it. And also, I don't want to describe all the thinking behind it as much as well in this video because it's not very fair on the people that have already bought the guide, so I'm sure you'll understand. But at least you're all getting the settings and you can see all the inputs and what everything is set to. So on the filament, again, it was volumetric flows, temperatures, and the minimum speeds and layer times. And the Z hop and the wiping is just all designed to make sure that the nozzle is getting nice and clean and you're not getting too much stringing and you're not getting any clogs. I haven't had any clogs, so that's good. I'm not sure if you guys have ever used the handy comparison tool that's to the right hand side of your process save buttons. You can compare two different processes or two different filaments or two different printer setups. So you can see here the difference on the H2D between the 0.06 and 0.04. Not a load of difference actually. Just a few tweaks here and there. The wall loops are lower to save a bit of time. So that's the H2D. So on to the A1. So as you'll probably guess, the settings are quite familiar to the ones in the H2D. It's just a case of trying to compensate for the fact that there's a lot more motion involved with it being a bed slinger, so thick and not quite as precise and expensive kit. So slowing things even further, even down to sort of like 10 millimeters per second and 15 millimeters per second at some places. Supports on the H2D and the A1 across all the layer heights is gonna be down to what's going to work with the model with a trial and error. What I've found is that if I was having a problem with a particular part of this model, which I was a few times, I would just cut it in Bambu Studio to just print the part that I was having difficulty with. So if you're wanting to test out your supports on a particular region, cut that region out and just test it with a few different settings rather than printing the whole model all the time. So just cut that one bit off and just print that on its own. Filament settings for the A1, very similar to the H2D. This is the 0.06 layer height. Different flow ratio, obviously, different machine. Slightly lower temperatures because it's not quite as precise. But everything else is quite similar. This is based on the Bambu Matte filament that I always use. But obviously, this is probably where your own settings are going to change quite a lot depending on whichever filament brand and type that you're going to use. So that's where your own calibration and test prints are really, really going to be crucial. And again, here's a nice handy comparison between the 0.06 and the 0.04 on the A1. A few more changes just to slow things down even more. The supports, I hadn't turned them on the 06 for whatever reason at this point. So that's the only reason why they're coming up false on that comparison. Right, print times. On the A1, you're looking at a day on the 0.06 settings. Yes, I told you it's going to take a long time. And 1 day, 18 hours on the 0.04 settings. And there is just a bit more detail, but is it worth that extra time? Only you can decide that. On the H2D, you're at 19 hours for the 0.06 version and just over a day for the 0.04. As explained in the guide, the speeds are the physical bottleneck. This is for if you've got the time to do it. Like me, I don't mind waiting. It's for collectors that want to make their own highest detail stuff possible. The last thing I want to talk about before I show you all the lovely footage of the painted up heads and the miniatures and go over those is that go through these different views that you can get of the sliced model. It was on here where I could see where the errors were happening underneath the chin area where there was loads of marks before. It was showing up that the speed and the flow was far too high, and that made me at least know what settings to sort of look at. It was trying to push through far too much filament, and that's where I found out that the vertical shell speeds were far too high because of the infill speeds being far too high. And that is where everything suddenly became amazing. Speaking of amazing, here's my rather quick attempt at painting them up. In these pictures, there is the 0.04 H2D, there is the resin one, and then there's the A1 and H2D 0.06 layer height ones. And I'm not going to tell you which ones are which. You'll have to make a guess in the comments. And I know that makes me a bit of a twat, sorry, but it's to prove a point. But I will tell you that these two guys that are done at 70% of the big ones are on the 0.04 layer height settings. Not been cleaned up yet, but I wanted to show you them hot off the press, as it were, and hopefully you'll see that the detail on them, even though they're like 30% smaller, is still astonishing. And I thought I'd really test it out by doing some minis. So the two painted ones are at the 0.06 layer height, and the unpainted one on the left is 0.06, and the two unpainted ones on the right are the brand new 0.04 ones. Just that little bit more detail, a little bit sharper. And they were just using tree slim supports, and as you saw, I did cut up the SDL to make it a little bit easier to print. I could do an entire video on minis, so let me know if you want to see that. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much for all your support. Thank you to all the Patreons and everybody who have purchased the guide on Gumroad. I put my neck out here with the settings video and producing a guide. All I can say is I've been testing and printing, and these settings have come out incredible. And if you want to go and have a look at a completed and painted FDM print that looks like it's been done on a resin printer, then check out this Wolverine video that prompted this settings video. Right, I'll catch you next time.